Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Manhood Unveiled podcast. I am your host, Zeth Lee. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for giving me some of your time just to listen to me talk, really. No, we try to help people out here. That's what we do. Got a good episode. I think it's going to be an interesting episode coming up here, talking about breaking the cycle and overcoming generational patterns as men and how important that can be in our life. So, all that's coming up right after this. Get ready for an epic journey into the heart of manhood with Manhood Unveiled. Join Zeth Lee as he guides you through the gripping tales of fatherhood, the resilient bonds of marriage, the roads of vulnerability, and overcoming temptation. Brace yourself for an odyssey of growth, connection, unwavering spirit, and faith. This is not just a podcast. This is Manhood Unveiled, where the story of manhood unfolds like never before. All right, once again, thank you for hanging out with me. I'm going to get my notes pulled up here. Thank you for hanging out with me. It means a lot to me. Not only can you find this podcast on the major podcast platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, there's also a video version of the podcast available on YouTube. So check that out. I will put a link in the description of this episode, linking to the video and the channel on YouTube. That way it gives you plenty of means to watch or listen or however you enjoy your podcasts. I try to put it out there for you in that way. So let's just go ahead and get right on into the meat and potatoes here, right? And we're going to talk about something that is huge. My wife talks about it with me all the time in reference to raising our 3.5-year-old daughter and breaking generational curses, breaking the cycle. And while we might, if you have your own kids, or if you're on your way to becoming a parent, while we might realize that there are some ways that we were raised or some things that our parents did that maybe we don't want to do. We don't want to exhibit that behavior on our children or that pattern. And if there are things that you realize good for you, we have our own. I think every parent does, and that's not saying that our parents did anything bad. I firmly believe that most parents don't want to do things that will cause their children harm, whether it be physically or emotionally. But you know, becoming a parent doesn't come with an instruction manual, and really, no, neither does breaking generational curses. But the only way that we can do that is to understand generational patterns, what they are, and how they can influence our behaviors, our beliefs, and how big of an impact they can have on our relationships as well. So, what is a generational pattern? I've got it right here in my notes. And this is just, I typed this into Google just to try to get the most basic definition of a generational pattern. So it says it right here: generational patterns are personality traits or patterns that are passed down from parent to child. And we don't realize it, but we do. We're at a young age, we are sponges, right? And we just soak up anything and everything that we see. And it doesn't matter if it's good or if it's bad, we still hold on to those things. And then as children, I know like with my daughter, sometimes she does things just to try to get a reaction. And it doesn't matter if it's a good thing or a bad thing. She just likes that she's getting the attention And so that's stuff that we instill in ourselves and that our parents instill in us at a very young age. And they can be things such as emotional repression, uh, vulnerability avoidance, and unhealthy communication styles. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And that's just some stuff that I have written down in my notes right here. I feel like those are some really big ones as men that we really deal with a lot. I know I'm guilty of all three of those. I'm also guilty of selfishness, greed, um, lack of empathy, anger. I got a lot. My list of character defects goes a long, long way. And this tip of the iceberg right here for the emotional repression. I cannot tell you how many times, and it's hard. But I cannot tell you how many times you feel something and it doesn't feel good, and instead of trying to figure out why you feel that way, you're just like, it'll be okay. I'm gonna just push this. I'm gonna just take this right here, and I'm gonna just push it down here, and I'm not gonna think about it, and it's gonna go away. Well, that feeling and that emotion didn't go away. You just stuffed it, and it'll make its way back up. Vulnerability avoidance. We're big, strong men, right? Why do we need to be vulnerable? Who do we want to see us be vulnerable? We have to portray that image, that big, strong man. I'm a manly man. Nothing bothers me. I'm okay even when we're not. And we will avoid that vulnerability to avoid looking weak at all costs. And then unhealthy communication styles, I mean, that's just plain and simple, right? I mean, like I had the tendency that when my wife talks to me about something that I've done that maybe has bothered her or upset her, sometimes I automatically go into a defensive state. I shut down. I feel like I'm being attacked. And instead of listening to her and communicating with her, I'm completely turned off to the communication, to the conversation, sorry, and feel like I'm being attacked and I have to defend myself. And that's not the case. And that's just another unhealthy communication style. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, and it's funny. They say effective communication, and I think we could all apply this to our lives, is the sender sends a message, you as the receiver listen to the message, and then just to make sure you have the message correct, you repeat the message back. And then the sender listens to you repeat the message back and they say, yes, that's correct, or no, that's not. Now, I'm not saying that when you're having a conversation with somebody and they're like, hey, how was your day today? And you're like, oh, how was my day? Y- yeah, that's what I said. No, we don't necessarily need to put that aspect of it and be so realistic with it all the time, but you have to actively listen, even when we don't want to, right? We have to actively listen and understand, try to understand the intent of whatever message we are getting. And that can be really hard to do. We're kind of like reading in between the lines a little bit, which is a little was very difficult. But it's I'm trying to think about how to say this without putting my foot in my mouth, but like no, we can't read people's minds, but I think if we open ourselves up to a conversation to begin with, and we don't automatically close ourselves down to it, then the communication goes a lot better because now we as people or as an individual are more open to having this conversation, which means we are able to listen better, we are able to understand better, and hopefully by doing that, we can prevent the conversation from taking a downward turn or a downward spiral. And there's nothing wrong with saying, "You know what? I can't have this conversation right now. I just can't do it. I appreciate you talking to me. I appreciate you telling me that. I can't have a conversation about it right now, but I will be glad to revisit this topic in a little bit of time." It's much better to walk away than sit there and stew and steam. So now that we kind of understand what these generational patterns are, and I've given some of my own examples here, it's important for you as the listener to try to identify personal patterns that could be negative in your life. And only you can do that. And you can ask people that are closest to you, like, "Hey, what are some of my like character defects? What are some personal patterns that I exhibit that don't seem to necessarily be the healthiest?" But one caveat to that, if you do that, you have to be willing to accept that criticism, I guess, even though it might not be criticism, constructive criticism, but you got to reflect on yourself, your family history, and really look back and identify these recurring behaviors. And sometimes that'll be really easy to do, and sometimes that can be difficult. What I would encourage you to do is not to try to dig super deep right to begin with, but instead scratch the surface and pick out the ones that are most obvious. Like just for me, for example, one of the really big ones for me, in my addiction, I'm selfish. Um, I do avoid vulnerability. I would seek intimacy from people that I didn't need to seek intimacy from. Also, I would put that into the selfish category. A lot of mine was like really self centered stuff. And I know like a big one with me being a dad now, me being a father and raising our daughter, is I don't quite have the patience that I need to have. And I try to, but I also, this is where it comes back in. Like, I'm the parent, do as I say, not as I do. Terrible. They're going to do as you do. But I'm the parent, do as I say, not as I do. Don't ask questions. And I kind of had these same things growing up, right? Like, well, why can't I do that? And the answer is because I said so. Well, yeah, that might be true. But what if we as parents just took the extra minute to explain to our children why we didn't want them to do something instead of giving them the snarky because I said so response? What if we took the time to actually listen to them even if we didn't want to because they have made us so mad and they've just tested us and tested us and tested us. And so now we're in the disciplinarian mode and we don't want to hear anything they have to say. What if we just took the time to listen? And then I understand where you're coming from, but you're still in trouble. And this is why. Just because we take the time to listen and hear our kids and our children doesn't mean that we're not being good parents or that we're being soft parents or that we're not disciplining our children. No, the answer is still going to be no, or you're still going to be in trouble. But thank you for talking to me. I never felt like I could talk to my parent. My wife never felt like she could talk to her parents. How do you think our communication has been? It's better now than it's ever been. But how do you think our communication has been? And not just with each other, but with other people. And that's something we don't want for our daughter. We want our daughter to always feel like she can come talk to us no matter what the outcome will be. We want her to feel comfortable coming to us and talking to us. And I kind of just rolled right into my next segment here and didn't even mean to. And it was the impact of these generational patterns on fatherhood and relationship, and discussing the importance of breaking these negative cycles to create healthier family dynamics. I just hit on this. I didn't even mean to roll into it, and I did. But if I, as a man, don't want to be vulnerable to my wife of all people, the one person who should always see vulnerability in me, I mean, yeah, just I don't know. It's so difficult because that was me for the longest time, and I still struggle with the vulnerability. And like there are times where I still try to be the big strong man. For instance, um, like 3 weeks ago, my wife got all of a sudden laid off from her job. Um, and she told me about it, and I could tell she was devastated. And unfortunately, I don't make enough money to where I could just look at my wife and say, "Well, it's okay, just stay home." We depend on her income. And it was eating me up inside. Like I was just worried because she had a deadline. Um, so I was just worried, so worried that she wasn't going to find a job, and I just didn't know what we were going to do about income because I can make up some of the income, but not all of her income. And I didn't tell her about that because I didn't want it to worry her. I knew she had enough on her plate already. And I finally came out and told her. I was like, "Hey, you know, I think you think I'm acting weird, and this is what's on my mind." And then her response was, "Well, thank you for telling me, but when you told me all these times that you were fine and we were going to be fine, you were really like spinning in circles." I said, "Well, I don't know if I was spinning in circles, but I was I've definitely been worried, and I just didn't I've been trying to be strong for you, and I didn't want you to see me worry because you've already got enough to worry about." But I could have just been vulnerable and been like, "Baby, you know what? It scares the crap out of me, and I don't know what we're gonna do, but I believe in you, and I know you're doing everything you can to find another job, and I know you're gonna find another job, and you're gonna do what's best for you and this family, and we're gonna be okay. And we're gonna give it to God, and we're really gonna pray on this, and we're really gonna have some faith." Dogs are about to start barking, and we have to have faith. As hard as it is to do, we have to have faith in God that God is going to see us through. Our life is nothing but seasons, seasons for friends, seasons for all types of situations. And God is always closing doors and opening doors in our life. It's up to us to realize that. It's up to us to give it to Him. In fact, we can give a lot of this to Him. We can give all of this to Him. These generational patterns, which end up being our defects of character, we can realize what they are and wholeheartedly be ready to give our lives and our will over to the care of God, be ready to give God these defects of character and then pray on it. Pray on it and give them to God. Because I can promise you, if you pray on these things, pray on having God remove these defects of character from you, it just makes you more conscious of them. And God will take them from you. It might not be right now, but He will take them. He's going to work in His own time and His own speed. And our timing and God's timing are two completely different things. But it does work. There's that step right there is in almost every single 12-step program, and it's there for a reason. And we're talking about the faith here, having faith in God and how big of a foundation that is. And it's just a pivotal role. Faith is such a pivotal role in breaking these patterns. I mean, look at, for example, I've been reading the book of Acts, and these disciples go out and they are preaching the word of God, spreading word about Jesus, and they're performing miracles, but they're also getting kickback along the way. They are getting pushback. Not everybody just received them with open arms, but they had faith that as long as they went out and did what God asked them to do, that they would be taken care of. I do believe that it says in the Bible that Jesus told them to not take anything extra, no food, no extra clothes, nothing like that. Just take what was on their backs and go, and that they would be taken care of. And they have to have faith that that was going to happen. They had to have faith that God was going to take care of them. And they had to have faith that no matter what, and this takes a big man to do, but no matter what other people said to them, and no matter how much people disagreed with them, they went against the status quo. They spread the word of God. They had faith in their God and that they were doing God's work and everything was going to be okay, regardless of what other people said to them or did. And that's just a small example. There's, I feel like there's like an example on every page in the New Testament of how being and in the Old Testament of how being faithful is just such a pivotal role, just having faith. And it's hard to do. Having faith can be really hard to do sometimes, especially when you're down on yourself. You feel like you're down on your luck and you just don't know what you're going to do. The easiest thing should be to have faith, but it's not, because we're putting our belief in something that we can't touch or see or feel or even really sit down and talk to. But I can tell you, I mean, my faith is not as strong as it should be, but I do know that my God only has my best interest at heart, and He wants what is best for me. and I have to give it's not my will for my life, it's God's will for my life, and I have to give up that power and that wanting to be in control because I'm not in control at all. And now maybe you think that starting this process of looking at these generational patterns could be difficult, and it is difficult because it really requires you to examine yourself. And and some people just like I kind of start shutting down when I really start examining myself because it's not comfortable. Well, it's okay to be uncomfortable, believe it or not. It's perfectly okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to feel anger. It's okay to feel sadness. It's okay to feel these emotions. And just because you feel them doesn't mean you have to do anything about them. It's okay to sit with them. Sit with these emotions. Why am I feeling this way? What does this mean for me? But we don't have to try to self-soothe. So, but some strategies for you if you feel like this could be too difficult, seek counseling, seek a therapist, find a really good mentor, man in your church, your pastor. Just that mentors are important. Just like we are mentors to our children, they pick up on these things that we do, even the smallest things. And it's never too late to start paving another road. Find you a good mentor, someone that you can really look up to and befriend that person. Look up to that person. But there's also nothing wrong with therapy. There's nothing wrong with counseling. Journaling could be another strong method. Journaling's not for me. I don't like to journal. I know guys that love it. They journal about situations in their day. They journal about their day. They go back, they look at their journal entries. They see what could I have done different? Could I have done something different? Did I overreact here? But what I want you to do and what really needs to be the base for this personal change, especially if you have children, is what kind of legacy do you want to leave for your child? What kind of legacy do you want to leave for your children? Because ultimately that's what we're doing. We don't just improve for ourselves, we improve for everybody around us. And we don't want our children to have these negative impacts that cause them harm later down the road. But it's up to us to realize what we are putting into them. But I think too, like one of the biggest things that I rely upon now is family and that strong, safe family culture is also very important. Dogs are barking again. But that strong, safe family culture is without that, me, I have nothing. Right. Sorry for the quick edit there. My wife just got home from a job interview. I went to check on her. Told her that as soon as I got done recording this, we'd talk all about it. So back to where I was at. That safety family culture. Without to me, without that, I have nothing. I want to feel safe with my family. I want my family to feel safe with me. I want my daughter to feel safe with me and not intimidated by me. I want my family to be able to talk to me about anything and vice versa. Guys, as always, this is a community for men by men. Share your experiences, not necessarily with this community. Absolutely put them in the comments if you want. Share your experience. I would love to hear other experiences. But it's okay to have your own community of men, like a men's fellowship or through your church. If you don't go to church, I highly recommend you find you a church. But if you don't go to church, you can still have a fellowship group of men that get together and talk talk about things that might bother them. Ask for advice from other men. It's okay. Now, you got to make sure that you're getting good advice, though. Not everybody is going to give you the best advice on every situation. You got to weigh your options a little bit. But have your own community. By all means, make this your community. Share your experience, share your strengths, share your hope, share your failures. I promise you, nobody will judge you here in this community. But start practicing that vulnerability here or within your community. And if you practice it a little bit at a time, practice the vulnerability, practice the openness, practice the honesty, practice the selflessness. If you start practicing that a little bit at a time and really praying on those things, they will come into the light soon enough. But I'm trying to think here. Is there anything else that I want to hit on? I'm sure there's so much more I could talk about. There's so many people who know so much more about this than I do. I'm just trying to give my little bit of insight and my stories. But here's what we hit on, right? We hit on generational patterns and what they are, understanding those, identifying those, the impacts that these patterns can have on fatherhood, being a man, and just relationships in general. We talked about how important it is to be vulnerable. And I can't stress that enough. How important your faith as a foundation is, your faith in God, how important that is. Good tools for change, right? We talked about the tools for change, a mentor, counseling, therapy. It is 2024, almost 2025. It is okay for men to go to therapy, to counseling. It's okay for men to talk to somebody. We got to get rid of that stigma because you talk to somebody, you're not strong. Bull crap. You're stronger if you talk to somebody, especially when you realize you need to, and you realize that you feel better after you do it. And we talked about forming your own community or allowing this to be your community. I highly encourage you to have a community of like minded men because if you surround yourself with what you want to be, it's kind of hard to be something different. Just saying. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, for giving me just a few minutes of your time in this episode. I hope that you got as much out of it as I got while I was putting stuff into it. Like I said, this community for men, by men. If there's a topic that you would like me to talk about, please drop it in the comments. Please share your experiences, share your failures, share your what you've overcame, share your story in the comments. Please follow, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that stuff for social media, wherever you listen to this podcast at. I encourage you to do that. All it does is help the channel grow, and it helps other people like me and you find the content, find this stuff, people who need this stuff, people who might really want to hear this stuff. So I just share it, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Or don't. You don't have to. I'm just asking you to if you would like to. I appreciate you hanging out with me. I appreciate you giving it a listen. I love each and every one of y'all. I'm Zeth Lee. This has been another episode of Manhood Unveiled. Y'all stay blessed. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, it means a lot to me because I'm hoping this develops into a community for men, by men. If you like the episode and you like the podcast, please feel free to subscribe and get notifications for when I do upload a new episode. And always feel free to drop a comment, and I'll try to respond to it. But until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you then.